The massive metal walls of Nexus Prime stretched endlessly in every direction. Lights blinked and hummed along the corridors as thousands of different alien beings moved through the station. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled, on 6 legs or floated through the air using strange technology. The air smelled of different worlds and different species all mixed together. Kim Tae-ho pressed his face against the viewing window of their family quarters. Outside, he could see ships from across the galaxy docking at the station. Some were sleek and silver. Others looked like living creatures with wings and tentacles. His breath fogged the glass as he watched a massive transport ship settle into its docking bay. Behind him, his younger sister Park Minji was unpacking her belongings. She carefully placed her collection of earth flowers on the small desk. The artificial flowers looked strange and colorful compared to everything else on the station. Their father, Ambassador Kim Ji-won, had told them they needed to represent Earth. Well, that meant being careful and staying out of trouble. Tae-ho was 16 years old. He had lived on 3 different space stations as his father moved between diplomatic posts. Each time they moved, he hoped the new place would be better for humans. Each time, he was disappointed. Humans were always the newcomers. They were always the ones other species looked down on. The door chimed and Lee Sunwoo entered their quarters. Sunwoo was Tae-ho's best friend. His parents were also diplomats working for the human government. Sunwoo had black hair that stuck up in different directions and eyes that always seemed to be laughing about something. "Did you see the dragon family in Sector 7? Sunwoo asked as he flopped down on their couch. Minji looked up from her unpacking. "Dragons are real?" she asked with wide eyes. "The Dreknari," Tae-ho said. He had studied different alien species during their journey to Nexus Prime. They are reptilian beings who can breathe fire. They used to be one of the most powerful species in this sector of the galaxy. "Used to be," Sunwoo repeated. "Now they live in the worst parts of the station. I heard some kind of sickness hit their homeworld. It mostly affected their children." Tae-ho had heard the same stories. The Dreknari plague had swept through their colonies 2 years ago. It did not kill the dragon children, but it made them smaller and weaker than they should be. Many other species now saw the dragons as failures. In galactic politics, being weak meant being ignored or worse. "Father says we should not get involved in alien politics," Minji said quietly. She was only 12, but she understood how dangerous their situation was. One wrong move could hurt all humans in the Federation. The 3 friends decided to explore the station. Ambassador Kim had given them permission to visit the commercial sectors as long as they stayed together and avoided any conflicts. The corridors outside their quarters were wide enough for the largest alien species to move comfortably. They took a transport tube down to the main commercial level. Here, hundreds of different species bought and sold goods from across the galaxy. The noise was incredible. Different languages mixed together in a symphony of clicks, whistles, and sounds that human throats could never make. Tae-ho watched a group of tall, blue aliens negotiating with shorter creatures that looked like walking crystals. Neither group paid any attention to the 3 human children walking past. That was normal. Humans were too new and too unimportant to notice most of the time. They passed shops selling technology that Earth scientists could only dream of. Other stores offered foods from dozens of different worlds. Some of the smells made Tae-ho hungry. Others made him cover his nose and try not to breathe. "Look at them," Sunwoo whispered. Across the wide corridor, a group of insectoid soldiers moved in, perfect formation. They wore the dark green armor of the Vex military caste. Each soldier stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their compound eyes could see in every direction at once. Sharp mandibles clicked as they communicated with each other. The Vex were the Federation's primary military force. They had joined the galactic community thousands of years before humans had even invented writing. Every other species respected and feared the Vex soldiers. They kept order on stations like Nexus Prime. They also made sure everyone knew exactly where they stood in the galactic hierarchy. As the soldiers passed, other aliens stepped aside and lowered their heads respectfully. When they passed the 3 human children, they did not even slow down. To the Vex, humans were beneath notice. They were too weak to be threats and too new to be important. "One day," Tae-ho said quietly, Humans will earn respect in the galaxy. How? Sunwoo asked. We do not have their technology. We do not have their military power. We barely have permission to be here. Before Taiho could answer, they heard something that made all three of them stop walking. It was the sound of children crying. But these were not human children. The sound was different. It had a strange musical quality that seemed to echo off the metal walls. Following the sound, they found themselves at the entrance to a small recreational area. It was one of the few places on the station where families could bring their children to play. The area had been built to accommodate different species' needs. There were climbing structures for beings with claws, swimming pools for aquatic species, and open spaces for creatures that needed room to fly. In one corner of the area they saw them, 5 young Draknari children playing quietly by themselves. The oldest looked about Minji's age. The youngest was barely a toddler. Their scales were a beautiful deep green color that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. But they were much smaller than dragon children should be. The plague had stunted their growth and weakened their natural fire-breathing abilities. Below, children were playing with simple toys that looked like they had been made from scrap metal and discarded materials. When the smallest one tried to breathe fire, only tiny sparks came out instead of the mighty flames that adult dragons could produce. The other dragon children tried to comfort their little sibling, but their own flames were equally weak. They look so sad, Minji whispered. An elderly Draknari sat on a nearby bench watching over the children. His scales were darker and showed the scars of a long life. This had to be one of their caretakers. Dragon families often had elders who looked after the young ones while the parents worked. Taiho felt something twist in his stomach as he watched the dragon children play. They were trying so hard to have fun despite their circumstances. They had been forced to leave their home world. Now they lived in the lowest sectors of the station where few other species bothered to go. Even here in this public space, they stayed in their own corner away from everyone else. We should go, Sunwoo said nervously. Father said not to get involved with other species problems. But Taiho could not stop watching the dragon children. There was something about their quiet dignity that reminded him of human refugees he had seen on other stations. People who had lost their homes but still tried to build new lives for their families. The sound of heavy footsteps made all 3 human children look up. A squad of Vex soldiers was entering the recreational area. They moved with the confident swagger of beings who knew they were at the top of the food chain. Other alien families quickly gathered their children and moved away from the approaching soldiers. Only the dragon children remained in their corner. They had nowhere else to go. Taiho felt his heart start to beat faster. Something was about to happen. Something that would change everything for him and his friends. In the vast metal corridors of Nexus Prime, where thousands of species tried to coexist peacefully, trouble was coming toward 5 small dragon children who had already suffered more than anyone should have to endure. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the halls of the galactic station and maybe even beyond. The Vex soldiers moved across the recreational area like predators hunting for prey. Their dark green armor clicked and hummed with each step. The compound eyes on their insect-like heads scanned everything around them. Other alien families had already fled the area, taking their children to safety. Only the 5 young Draknari remained in their corner, still playing with their simple toys. Sub-Commander Krixtal led the squad of 6 soldiers. He was larger than the others and had more scars across his armored shell. A series of medals hung from his chest plate, showing his years of service to the Federation military. His mandibles clicked with amusement as he spotted the dragon children. Taiho felt his hands clench into fists as he watched from across the recreational area. Beside him, Sunwoo grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward the exit. Minji had gone, very quiet and pale. All 3 human children could sense that something terrible was about to happen. Look what we have here, Krixtal said in the common galactic language. His voice had a buzzing quality that made the words sound harsh and threatening. Little lizards playing in the big beings area. The dragon children looked up from their games. The oldest one, a girl with beautiful emerald scales, moved protectively in front of the younger ones. Her small flames flickered nervously around her mouth. But the fire was weak and barely visible. The plague had robbed her of the mighty dragon fire that should have been her birthright. Please, sir, the dragon girl said in careful common language. We are allowed to be here. The recreational area is open to all Federation species. Crixtal laughed. The sound was like metal scraping against metal. All Federation species, yes. But are you really still a proper species? Look at you. Pathetic little flames. Weak little bodies. You are barely dragons at all anymore. The other Vex soldiers spread out around the dragon children. They moved like they were surrounding prey that might try to escape. Their weapons remained holstered, but their stance made it clear they were ready for violence if they decided it was necessary. Your people used to breathe fire that could melt battle armor, another soldier said mockingly. Now you can barely light a candle. How the mighty have fallen. The smallest dragon child started to whimper. He was barely 3 years old and did not understand why these scary soldiers were being mean to him and his friends. His tiny claws clutched a toy spaceship made from discarded metal pieces. When he tried to breathe fire in distress, only small puffs of smoke came out. Listen to that, Crixtal said with cruel delight. The little lizard is crying like a human baby. Maybe the plague turned you into humans. That would explain why you are so weak now. The elderly Draknari caretaker Elder Thaxwin stood up from his bench. His old scales were faded, but his eyes still held the proud fire of his people. He walked slowly toward the soldiers, his back straight despite his advanced age. These children have done nothing wrong, Thaxwin said with dignity. They are playing peacefully, as is their right under Federation law. Please leave them alone. Federation law, Crixtal repeated with amusement. The same law that says species must contribute to galactic society to maintain their status. What exactly do your broken children contribute, old dragon? What purpose do they serve except to remind everyone of your people's failure? Thaxwin's eyes flashed with anger, but he kept his voice calm. These children are the future of our people. They will grow strong again in time. Will they? Another soldier asked. He picked up one of the dragon children's toys and examined it. This looks like garbage to me. Is this what dragons make now? Toys from scrap metal because you cannot afford real materials. The soldier threw the toy hard against the metal wall. It shattered into pieces. The small dragon who owned it started to cry harder. His pathetic little flames flickered as tears rolled down his scaled cheeks. Other alien beings had gathered at the edges of the recreational area to watch the confrontation. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them moved to help. A few even seemed to enjoy seeing the once proud dragons being humiliated. In galactic politics, weakness invited cruelty from those seeking to improve their own status. Stop it, the oldest dragon girl said bravely. You are being mean for no reason. We have not hurt anyone. Crixtal leaned down until his insect face was level with hers. His compound eyes reflected her image dozens of times. Mean, he asked with false surprise. We are teaching you about reality, little lizard. The strong survive and the weak get stepped on. That is how the galaxy works. He reached out with one clawed hand and knocked over the careful arrangement of toys the dragon children had been playing with. Blocks and figurines scattered across the floor. The children scrambled to gather their precious belongings while the soldiers laughed at their distress. The smallest dragon child was now wailing in terror. His cries echoed off the metal walls of the recreational area. The sound was heartbreaking. It spoke of innocence confronted with cruelty it could not understand. His tiny flames sputtered and died, leaving only wisps of smoke. Make it stop crying, Crixtal ordered his soldiers. The sound is annoying. One of the soldiers drew his weapon. It was an energy blaster capable of stunning or killing depending on the setting. He pointed it at the terrified dragon child. Maybe a little shock will teach it to be quiet, the soldier suggested. Elder Thaxwin moved quickly for such an old being. He placed himself between the weapon and the child. You cannot, he said desperately. He is just a baby. Federation law protects children of all species. Federation law protects useful species, Crixtal corrected. Are dragons still useful, old one? Or are you just taking up space that could be better used by stronger people? From across the recreational area, Taiho watched in growing horror. His hands were shaking with anger. Beside him, Sunwoo was pulling harder on his arm, trying to drag him toward the exit. Minji had tears in her eyes as she watched the dragon children suffer. "We have to go," Sunwoo whispered urgently. "This is not our business, we cannot help them." But Taiho could not move. He watched the terrified dragon children huddled together while armored soldiers threatened them with weapons. He saw the elderly caretaker trying desperately to protect babies with his own frail body. He heard the heartbreaking cries of innocents who had already lost their homeworld and now faced more cruelty. The soldier with the drawn weapon adjusted his blaster settings. "Just a small shock," he said with cruel amusement. "To teach proper respect." The weapon hummed as it charged up. Other aliens in the area turned away, not wanting to witness what was about to happen. Some walked quickly toward the exits. Others covered their children's eyes. Elder Thaxwin spread his arms wide, trying to shield all 5 dragon children at once. His old flames flickered weakly around his mouth, but he had no strength left to fight trained soldiers. All he could do was offer his own life to protect the young ones in his care. Time seemed to slow down as Taiho watched the scene unfold. Everything his father had taught him about diplomacy and staying out of alien politics warred with something deeper inside him. Something that refused to let innocent children suffer while he stood by and did nothing. The soldier's finger moved toward the trigger. The dragon children whimpered in terror. And somewhere in the crowd of watching aliens, a human boy named Taiho made a decision that would change everything. The moment stretched like eternity as the Vex soldier's finger moved toward the trigger of his energy weapon. The dragon children huddled behind Elder Thaxwin, their small flames flickering with terror. Other alien beings in the recreational area had either fled or turned away, unable to watch what was about to happen. Then Taiho broke free from Sunwoo's grip and ran across the open space. "Stop!" Taiho shouted as he threw himself between the weapon and the crying dragon child. The recreational area fell completely silent. Every eye turned to stare at the human boy who had just done the impossible. Humans did not interfere in alien disputes. Humans stayed quiet and tried not to cause trouble. Humans certainly did not challenge armed Vex soldiers. Sub-Commander Crickstall's compound eyes focused on Taiho with surprise and growing anger. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what had just happened. A member of the galaxy's newest and weakest species had just defied the Federation's primary military force. "What did you say, human whelp?" Crickstall demanded. Taiho's heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst from his chest. His legs felt weak and his hands were shaking. But he did not move away from the dragon children. The smallest one was still crying softly behind him. Taiho could feel the child's tiny claws clutching at his pants leg. "I said stop," Taiho repeated. His voice cracked slightly, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "Leave them alone." The Vex soldiers looked at each other in amazement. Some began to laugh. The sound was harsh and metallic like grinding machinery. They could not believe that a human child was trying to give them orders. "Do you know who you are speaking to, boy?" Crickstall asked as he stepped closer to Taiho. The sub-commander towered over the 16-year-old human. His armored form cast a long shadow across the frightened dragon children. "I know exactly who you are," Taiho said. "You are Sub-Commander Crickstall of the Vex 3rd Military Division. You have served the Federation for 23 years. You have received commendations for bravery in battle and leadership under fire." The Vex soldiers stopped laughing. They were surprised that a human child knew so much about their commander. Crickstall's eyes narrowed as he studied Taiho more carefully. "Then you know I have the authority to maintain order on this station," Crickstall said dangerously. "And right now you are disturbing that order." "No," Taiho said firmly. "You are the one disturbing the order. Article 12 of the Federation Charter clearly states that all member species have equal rights to use public facilities. Article 15 specifically protects the welfare of children, regardless of species. And Article 21 prohibits the use of military weapons against civilians except in cases of clear and immediate danger." More aliens had gathered to watch the confrontation. They whispered to each other in various languages. Many seemed shocked that a human could quote Federation law so precisely. Others appeared impressed despite themselves. Crickstall's mandibles clicked furiously. "You dare quote law to me, human? Your species has barely been in the Federation for 5 years. We have been enforcing these laws for thousands of years. Then you should know them better than I do, Taiho shot back. But apparently you need a reminder. These children have broken no laws. They were playing peacefully in a public area that they have every right to use. You threatened them with weapons for no reason except your own amusement. Behind Taiho, the dragon children had stopped crying. They stared at the human boy who had risked himself to protect them. Elder Thaxwin looked amazed and grateful. His old eyes shone with tears. From across the area, Sunwoo and Minji watched in terror and pride. They knew their friend was probably about to get himself killed, but they also knew he was doing the right thing. You have no idea what you are dealing with, boy, one of the other Vex soldiers warned. These dragons are failures. Their own weakness brought plague to their worlds. They are a burden on Federation resources. Their weakness? Taiho asked angrily. They are children. What weakness could they possibly have except being too young to defend themselves against bullies like you? The word bullies hit the Vex soldiers, like a physical blow. They were proud warriors who had fought in great battles across the galaxy. Being called bullies by a human child was perhaps the greatest insult they could imagine. Krixtal drew his own weapon. Unlike his subordinate, he did not point it at the dragon children. He aimed it directly at Taiho's chest. The energy blaster hummed with deadly power. You will move aside, human, Krixtal ordered, or you will face the consequences of interfering with military operations. This is not a military operation, Taiho said steadily. This is 6 armed soldiers threatening unarmed children. There is a difference. More humans had arrived in the recreational area. Taiho could see adults from the diplomatic quarters pushing through the crowd. His heart sank as he recognized his father, Ambassador Kim Ji-won, among them. Taiho had just destroyed his family's carefully maintained political position. But then, something unexpected happened. Minji broke away from the crowd and ran to stand beside her brother. Her small hand slipped into his as she faced the armed soldiers. He is right, Minji said in her clear young voice. You should not hurt children. A moment later, Sunwoo joined them. He was pale and shaking, but he took his place beside his friends. 3 human children now stood between the Vex soldiers and the dragon young. This is getting ridiculous, one of the Vex soldiers muttered. Are we really going to be stopped by human children? They cannot stop us, Krixtal snarled. But they can learn what happens to those who interfere with Vex authority. He raised his weapon, preparing to fire a stunning blast that would drop all 3 human children. The dragon babies would be left defenseless. The lesson about respecting superior species would be taught clearly. But before he could pull the trigger, another voice rang out across the recreational area. Sub-Commander Krixtal, Ambassador Kim Ji-won called out as he approached with several other human adults. I believe we need to discuss this situation. The ambassador's voice was calm and diplomatic, but there was steel underneath the polite words. Behind him came other humans, including Dr. Choi Hyeri, a xenobiologist who worked on the station. More importantly, several alien beings from other species had also arrived, including some wearing the robes of Federation legal observers. Krixtal found himself facing a much larger audience than he had expected. What had started as casual cruelty toward helpless children had become a public incident with potential diplomatic consequences. Ambassador, Krixtal said carefully, your son has interfered with legitimate security operations. Has he? Ambassador Kim asked mildly. I see 3 human children standing with 5 dragon children in a public recreational area. Where exactly is the security threat that requires drawn weapons? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone present waited to see how the Vex sub-commander would respond. His answer would determine whether this confrontation escalated into something much larger or ended with the dragon children safe. Taiho remained still between the soldiers and the dragon young. His legs were shaking and his mouth was dry. But he did not move. He had made his choice. Whatever happened next, he would not abandon the innocent children who needed protection. The tension in the recreational area was thick enough to cut with a blade. Sub-Commander Krixtal found himself surrounded by a growing crowd of humans and other alien species. What had started as simple bullying had become a very public confrontation, with serious diplomatic implications. Dr. Choi Hyeri stepped forward from the group of human adults. She was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, but her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent years studying alien biology and cultures. "Sub-Commander," she said politely, "I am Dr. Hyeri, a xenobiologist stationed here. I could not help but overhear your comments about the Draknari children being weak and burdens on Federation resources." Krikstal's compound eyes focused on the Yao, human scientist. "What of it?" he asked suspiciously. "I think you may have been given incorrect information about their condition," Dr. Hyeri said calmly. She pulled out a small datapad and began calling up files. "I have been studying the effects of the plague that affected the Draknari colonies. The results are quite fascinating." Elder Thaxwin looked up sharply from where he knelt beside the dragon children. Hope flickered in his ancient eyes. He had not expected any human to know about his people's true situation. The plague did not weaken these children, Dr. Hyeri continued as she displayed genetic scans on her datapad. It activated dormant genes that have been sleeping in Draknari DNA for thousands of years. These children are not sick or broken. They are evolving. Several alien observers moved closer to examine the scientific data. Among them were representatives from species that served as Federation legal authorities. Their presence made it impossible for the Vex soldiers to simply end the confrontation with violence. "Evolving how?" asked one of the legal observers. She was a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. Her species, the Altari, were known throughout the galaxy for their fairness and wisdom. Dr. Hyeri smiled as she expanded the genetic displays. "The dragon children's smaller size and different fire production are adaptations. They can survive in atmospheric conditions that would kill adult dragons. Their flames burn at different temperatures and contain different chemical compounds. Most importantly, they appear to be immune to a wide range of diseases and toxins." Teho felt the small dragon child behind him grip his leg more tightly. But now it was not from fear. The little one seemed to sense that something important was happening. Something that might change how others saw him and his siblings. "You are saying these children are superior to normal dragons?" the Altari legal observer asked with growing interest. "In many ways, yes," Dr. Hyeri confirmed. "They represent the next stage of Draknari evolution. Their people did not lose their strength to plague. They gained new abilities that will help them thrive in environments their ancestors never could have survived." Elder Thaxwin stood slowly, his aged body trembling with emotion. "She speaks truth," he said in a voice thick with tears. "Our younglings are not broken. They carry the future of our people in their genes, but we were afraid to tell anyone. We thought others would try to study them or take them away." Sub-Commander Krikstal looked uncomfortable as the scientific evidence mounted against his position. Around him, other Vex soldiers shifted nervously. They had expected to intimidate helpless children, not confront a growing crowd of witnesses and legal authorities. Ambassador Kim Ji-won stepped forward with the diplomatic skills that had earned him his position. "Sub-Commander, I believe there has been a misunderstanding here. Your soldiers seem to have mistaken evolved dragon children for sick ones, and my son seems to have mistaken legitimate confusion for deliberate cruelty. It was a face-saving offer." The ambassador was giving Krikstal a way out of the confrontation without admitting his soldiers had done anything wrong. All parties could claim misunderstanding rather than malice. But Taiho was not ready to let the Vex soldiers escape responsibility so easily. "There was no misunderstanding, Father," he said clearly. "They called the children failures and lizards. They broke their toys and threatened them with weapons. They knew exactly what they were doing." Minji squeezed her brother's hand supportively. "They made the little one cry," she added. "That was mean." Sunwoo nodded agreement. "We all saw it happen. They were being bullies." The 3 human children's testimony was damaging because it was so simple and honest. They had no political agenda or diplomatic concerns. They had simply witnessed cruelty and were willing to speak truth about it. More aliens had gathered to watch the confrontation. Among them were members of species that had their own difficult relationships with the Vex military. They listened carefully to every word, knowing this incident might affect their own treatment by Federation forces. Dr. Hieri continued displaying her research data. The chemical composition of the children's flames is particularly interesting, she explained to the growing crowd. They can produce healing compounds as well as destructive ones. These abilities could revolutionize medical treatment across dozens of species. One of the dragon children, a girl about Minji's age, stepped forward shyly. She looked at Dr. Hieri and then at the crowd of watching aliens. Very carefully, she took a deep breath and breathed out a small stream of flame. But this flame was different from normal dragon fire. It glowed with soft blue and green colors instead of the typical red and orange. The flame danced in the air for a moment before settling on a small potted plant that had been knocked over during the confrontation. Where the flame touched the plant, its broken stems began to heal and regrow. Damaged leaves uncurled and turned healthy green again. Within moments, the plant looked better than it had before being damaged. Gasps of amazement came from the watching crowd. Healing flame was something that had never been seen before in the galaxy. The dragon children were not just evolved. They possessed abilities that could benefit every species in the Federation. Magnificent, whispered the Altari legal observer. These children are treasures, not burdens. Elder Thaxwin watched with pride as more dragon children began demonstrating their unique abilities. One breathed flames that could purify contaminated air. Another produced fire that could break down toxic compounds into harmless elements. The youngest dragon child, the one who had been crying, looked up at Taiho with large, grateful eyes. He took a small breath and produced a tiny flame that sparkled like stars. It was beautiful and peaceful and full of innocent joy. Subcommander Krixtal found himself in an impossible position. The evidence was overwhelming that his soldiers had threatened valuable and unique children. Worse, they had done so in front of multiple witnesses, including legal authorities from other species. Perhaps, he said carefully, there has been some miscommunication here. My soldiers were simply trying to maintain order. By threatening children with weapons? Asked the Altari observer pointedly. Ambassador Kim saw an opportunity to resolve the situation diplomatically. I suggest we consider this a learning experience for everyone involved, he said smoothly. Clearly, better communication between species could prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. But the dragon children had heard enough diplomatic language. They understood that the adults were trying to excuse the cruelty they had experienced. The oldest dragon girl stepped forward with dignity beyond her years. The soldiers were not confused, she said in careful common language. They called us failures and lizards. They said we were useless. They broke our toys because they wanted to hurt us. That is not misunderstanding. That is being mean. Her simple, honest words cut through all the diplomatic maneuvering. She had stated the truth clearly and without compromise. The watching crowd murmured agreement. Many had witnessed similar treatment from those who considered themselves superior. Dr. Hieri knelt down to the dragon girl's level. What is your name, young one? She asked gently. I am called Ember, the girl replied. Because my flames burn different colors. Ember, that is a beautiful name, Dr. Hieri said warmly. Would you and your siblings be willing to help me teach others about your special abilities? I think many people would like to learn from you. Ember looked back at Elder Thaxwin, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at Taiho, who had risked himself to protect her and her siblings. Only if the human boy can help too, she said. He was brave for us when no one else would be. The moment was transforming from confrontation to something entirely different. The dragon children were no longer victims. They were beings with unique gifts that could benefit the entire galaxy. And the human children who had defended them were being recognized as heroes rather than troublemakers. News of the confrontation spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire. Within hours, beings from dozens of different species had gathered in the recreational area to witness the dragon children's abilities. What had started as a simple case of bullying had become the most significant scientific discovery in decades. Dr. Hieri worked quickly to document everything the dragon children could do. Her portable scanners recorded the unique chemical signatures of their different flames. Each child produced fire with different properties and purposes. Some could heal living tissue. Others could purify contaminated substances. The youngest could create flames that generated breathable atmosphere for oxygen-dependent species. This changes everything we know about Draknari biology, Dr. Hieri explained to the growing crowd of scientists and observers. These children represent a quantum leap in evolutionary development. They are not just immune to the plague that affected their homeworld. They have gained abilities that could solve medical and environmental problems across the galaxy. Taiho stood beside Ember as she demonstrated her healing flames on a series of test materials. The dragon girl had overcome her shyness and now seemed proud to show what she could do. Her flames danced in complex patterns as they worked their magic on damaged objects and dying plants. "How long have you known you could do this?" Taiho asked her gently. "Since the sickness came," Ember replied in her careful common language. "But the adult dragons told us to hide it. They said other people might want to take us away if they knew we were different." Elder Thaxwin approached with tears streaming down his scaled cheeks. "We were so afraid," he admitted to Dr. Hieri. "After losing our homeworld, we could not bear the thought of losing our children too. We thought if others knew about their gifts, they would see them as things to be studied, rather than younglings to be loved." The fear was understandable. Throughout galactic history, powerful abilities had often led to exploitation rather than protection. The Dragon Elders had hidden their children's gifts to keep them safe, but in doing so they had also allowed others to see the children as weak and worthless. Sub-Commander Krixtal watched the demonstrations with growing unease. His casual cruelty toward what he thought were helpless children had been witnessed by hundreds of beings. Worse, those children had turned out to be among the most valuable individuals in the entire Federation. Commander Zithak arrived at the recreational area with a full escort of senior Vex officers. He was an imposing figure, even by Vex standards. His dark green armor was polished to perfection and covered with decorations from a lifetime of military service. When he spoke, other Vex soldiers listened with absolute attention. "Sub-Commander Krixtal," Zithak said in a voice like grinding stone. "Report." Krixtal straightened to attention, but he could not hide his nervousness. "Sir, there was a situation with some alien children. It has been resolved." "Has it?" Commander Zithak asked as he surveyed the crowd of watching beings. His compound eyes took in the scientific equipment, the legal observers, and the obvious tension in the air. "Explain to me why I am receiving reports that Vex soldiers threatened children with weapons in a public area." The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Everyone present waited to see how Krixtal would respond. His answer would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future relationship between the Vex military and other Federation species. Before Krixtal could speak, Sunwoo stepped forward. He had been using his personal recording device to document everything that happened. "Sir, I have video of the entire incident if you would like to see it." Commander Zithak's attention focused on the young human. "You recorded what happened, boy?" "Yes, sir," Sunwoo replied respectfully. "I always record interesting things. This seemed very interesting." The commander accepted Sunwoo's device and began reviewing the footage. His expression grew darker as he watched his soldiers mock and threaten dragon children. When he reached the part where weapons were drawn against crying toddlers, his mandibles clicked with barely controlled fury. "This is how Vex soldiers maintain order?" he asked coldly. Krixtal tried to salvage the situation. "Sir, those children appeared to be diseased and potentially dangerous. We were protecting other station residents." "From what?" Commander Zithak demanded. "From children playing with toys, from toddlers who can barely produce sparks. You saw weakness and decided to abuse it for your own amusement." The condemnation was devastating because it came from the highest-ranking Vex officer on the station. Commander Zithak was known throughout the military for his honor and integrity. When he spoke, other species listened with respect. Dr. Hieri approached the Vex commander with her scientific data. "Sir, if I may show you what we have discovered about these children." Commander Zithak reviewed the genetic scans and ability demonstrations with growing amazement. "These younglings are the future of their species," he said with wonder. "And my soldiers threaten to harm them." "Not all your soldiers, sir," Taiho said quietly. "Just these ones." The distinction was important. Taiho was not condemning the entire Vex military, just the individuals who had chosen to abuse their power. It was a diplomatic gesture that allowed Commander Zithak to address the problem without losing face for his entire organization. "You are the human boy who stood between my soldiers and these children?" Commander Zithak asked as he studied Taiho carefully. "Yes, sir." "Why did you do this thing? You had nothing to gain and much to lose by interfering." Taiho thought about the question seriously. "Because it was wrong, sir. They were hurting children who could not defend themselves. Someone had to stop it." "Someone had to stop it," the commander repeated slowly. "But why you, human boy? Why not someone else?" "There was no one else, sir," Taiho replied simply. "Just me and my friends." Commander Zithak was quiet for a long moment. Around him, the crowd waited to see what judgment he would render. His decision would set an important precedent for how the Federation dealt with abuse of power by military forces. "Sub-Commander Krixtal," he said finally. "You and your squad are hereby relieved of duty pending formal investigation. You will surrender your weapons and report to detention immediately." "Sir," Krixtal protested, "we were following standard protocols for maintaining order." "Standard protocols do not include threatening children with lethal weapons," Commander Zithak replied coldly. "Standard protocols do not include destroying personal property for amusement. Standard protocols do not include calling Federation citizens failures and lizards." The formal language made it clear that this was not just military discipline, but potential criminal charges. Other Vex soldiers moved to escort Krixtal and his squad away. They would face justice for their actions. But Commander Zithak was not finished. He turned to address the entire crowd that had gathered to witness the events. "Let it be known throughout Nexus Prime and beyond," he announced in a voice that carried clearly across the recreational area. "The Vex military exists to protect all Federation citizens, especially those who cannot protect themselves. Any soldier who abuses this trust will face the full consequences of military justice." Then he did something unprecedented. He approached Elder Thaxwin and performed a formal Vex salute of respect. "Elder Thaxwin, I apologize on behalf of the Vex military for the treatment your younglings received. They are treasures of the Federation and will be protected as such." The elderly dragon's eyes filled with tears again, but these were tears of gratitude and relief. For the first time since the plague struck his people's homeworld, someone with real power had acknowledged the value and dignity of dragon children. Commander Zithak then turned to Taiho, Minji, and Sunwoo. "Young humans, you have shown courage and honor that would be recognized in any military force in the galaxy. The Vex owe you a debt of gratitude." The formal recognition from such a high-ranking officer sent ripples through the crowd. Humans had just been publicly praised by the Federation's primary military force. It was a level of respect that would change how other species viewed Earth's people. But perhaps most importantly, the dragon children were no longer seen as weak refugees. They were acknowledged as the gifted and valuable beings they had always been. Their unique abilities would help them find new purpose and respect throughout the galaxy. The recreational area that had witnessed cruelty and confrontation had become the site of justice and recognition. The stage was set for changes that would echo far beyond Nexus Prime. 3 months after the incident in the recreational area, Nexus Prime had become a very different place. The changes started small, but grew into something that transformed life on the station for every species that lived there. The dragon children were no longer hidden away in the lower sectors. They had been moved to comfortable quarters near the scientific research facilities where Dr. Hieri and her team could study their unique abilities. But this was not the cold clinical research that Elder Thaxwin had feared. The children were treated as partners in discovery rather than test subjects. Ember had become something of a celebrity throughout the station. Her healing flames had helped treat injuries and diseases that had puzzled doctors for years. She worked with medical teams from a dozen different species, teaching them how to use her fire for healing. but she always insisted that Taiho be present during important demonstrations. He stood with us when no one else would, she explained to anyone who asked. He is Flame Brother now. The title of Flame Brother was the highest honor the Draknari could give to a non-dragon. It meant that Taiho would always be considered family by their people. Elder Thaxwin had performed the ceremony himself, with tears of joy streaming down his ancient face. Minji had started something even more remarkable. She had convinced station administrators to create the first interspecies youth program on Nexus Prime. Children from different alien races now played together regularly. They shared games and stories and learned about each other's cultures. The sight of human children playing with dragon young Altari kids and even some young Vex had amazed adult beings throughout the station. What had seemed impossible just months before was now a daily occurrence. Sunwoo had become the station's unofficial documentary maker. His recordings of the original incident had been viewed billions of times across the galaxy. But more importantly, he continued to document positive interactions between species. His work showed the galaxy that cooperation and friendship were possible even between very different peoples. Commander Zithak had used the incident to implement sweeping reforms in how Vex military forces interacted with civilian populations. New training programs emphasized protection of the vulnerable rather than domination of the weak. The changes had improved the Vex military's reputation throughout the Federation. Subcommander Krixtal and his squad had faced military tribunal for their actions. They were stripped of rank and expelled from military service. More importantly, their trial had been broadcast across the galaxy as an example that abuse of power would not be tolerated. Dr. Hieri's research on the dragon children had revolutionized multiple fields of science. The healing properties of their flames had led to breakthrough medical treatments. Their ability to purify contaminated environments was being used to restore damaged worlds. Most remarkably, their atmospheric generation abilities were making it possible to terraform planets that had previously been uninhabitable. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species viewed humans. The courage shown by 3 human children had challenged every assumption about Earth's people being weak and unimportant. Humans were now seen as beings with strong moral principles who would stand up for justice even when it was dangerous. Ambassador Kim Ji-won found that his diplomatic work had become much easier. Other species now approached humans with respect rather than condescension. Trade agreements that had been impossible before were now readily accepted. Humans were being invited to participate in galactic councils and decision-making bodies. Your son changed everything for our people, Ambassador Kim told his wife as they watched Taiho playing with dragon children in the recreational area. His moment of courage opened doors that diplomacy alone never could have. The recreational area itself had been transformed. What was once a place where strong species intimidated weak ones had become a symbol of cooperation and mutual respect. A memorial plaque had been installed commemorating the day when 3 human children stood up for dragon young and changed the course of galactic history. Elder Thaxwin spent his days watching the dragon children thrive in their new environment. They were no longer afraid to show their abilities or to interact with other species. They had learned that being different could be a strength rather than something to hide. The younglings asked me to tell them the story every night, he told Dr. Hieri as they watched the children play. The story of the human boy who was brave for dragons when grown beings turned away. The story had indeed become legend among the Draknari people, but it was also told by other species throughout the galaxy. Parents shared it with their children as an example of how courage and compassion could overcome hatred and fear. On the anniversary of the incident station, administrators organized a celebration that brought together beings from every species on Nexus Prime. The recreational area was decorated with lights and banners representing dozens of different worlds and cultures. Taiho stood before the crowd feeling nervous but proud. Beside him stood Ember Minji Sunwoo and the other dragon, children who had become his closest friends. Behind them, Elder Thaxwin smiled with tears in his ancient eyes. When I saw those soldiers threatening the dragon children, I did not think about being a hero, Taiho told the gathering. I just thought about what was right. Children should be protected, not hurt. Weak beings should be helped, not bullied. That is not human wisdom or dragon wisdom or Vex wisdom. That is just basic decency. The crowd erupted in applause from beings with claws, hands, tentacles, and appendages that defied description. The sound was beautiful because it represented unity across species that had once seen themselves as separate and superior to each other. Ember stepped forward and breathed out one of her special flames. But this one was different from any she had created before. It rose high into the air and spread out like a canopy of light above the celebrating crowd. The flame contained every color imaginable, dancing and swirling in patterns that spoke of hope and friendship and shared dreams. "This is for all the children who will never be afraid again," she announced in common language that had grown much more confident over the months. "And for the friends who stand with us no matter what." As the celebration continued late into the station's artificial night cycle, beings from different species mingled and shared stories and food and laughter. Young ones played together while their parents watched with wonder at how much their world had changed. In quiet moments between the festivities, Taiho found himself thinking about the future. Humans were no longer the newest and weakest species in the Federation. They had earned their place through courage and compassion rather than military might or technological superiority. The dragon children were thriving and using their gifts to help beings throughout the galaxy. Their story would inspire other species to look for hidden potential in those they had dismissed as weak or different. But most importantly, children of all species now had examples to follow. They had seen that even young beings could make a difference when they chose to do what was right instead of what was safe. The recreational area of Nexus Prime had witnessed cruelty transform into kindness. It had seen fear become friendship. It had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change the entire galaxy. As the celebration wound down and families began returning to their quarters, Taiho looked up at the artificial stars, projected on the station's dome ceiling. Somewhere out there were countless worlds filled with beings who were learning new ways to treat each other with dignity and respect. The human boy who had once felt like an outsider in the vast galaxy now knew that he belonged. Not because his species was strong or advanced, but because compassion and courage were universal languages that every intelligent being could understand. The crying of dragon young had been replaced by the laughter of children from many worlds, playing together under the light of healing flames. And in that laughter was the sound of a better future for everyone.